My mom humiliated me for filming makeup videos and said it was ridiculous. But everything changed when I started making money from it. The morning my mother called me a clown for wearing drugstore lipstick. I was standing at the kitchen sink with wet hands and a cracked sponge, staring at the same chipped mug I had washed 1,000 times. My name is Louise. I live in a mid-sized town in the United States. The house was quiet in that way that never feels peaceful. Just tight, like the walls were bracing for impact. I had my phone propped up against the dish rack because I was trying to film a quick clip about makeup you can do before work without looking like you tried too hard. Which, yes, is funny, considering my mother thought any effort on my face meant I was trying too hard at life itself. "Are you seriously recording yourself again?" she asked from the doorway. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask if I slept. She didn't look at the sink full of her late-night dishes or the sticky counter I'd wiped down twice already. She just locked onto the phone like it was a threat. "It's just a short one," I said, keeping my voice light on purpose. By then, my whole survival strategy was sounding like I didn't care, because if I sounded like I cared, she would press exactly there. "People like these quick tips." "People," she repeated, and the way she said it made the word sound dirty. "Who are these people? Children? Weirdos? You're almost an adult and you're still playing dress-up." I was 23 when I left. About a year later, one video went truly viral. By 25, the income was steady enough that I could breathe. Not rich, not glamorous, just stable. Rent paid, groceries stocked, no cold sweat every time my phone buzzed. The kind of stability my mother used to act like was a personality trait you were born with, not something you built. My mother was a widow, and she wore that word like armor and a knife at the same time. She'd been widowed since I was 16, the year my father died in a traffic accident on a rainy road everyone in our town swears is cursed. People brought casseroles. People said, "If you need anything," and then slowly went back to their lives. My mother never went back to hers. She stayed in the house, kept the curtains half closed, and collected her grief like proof the world owed her something. And maybe it did. But she decided I was the one who had to pay. I was the youngest of 4 daughters, which meant I was born into a system that was already running without me. My 3 older sisters were adults when my dad died. Not mortgage and minivan adults, but grown enough to have their own jobs, their own places, their own messy lives that didn't require my mother's daily supervision. They picked careers my mother could brag about at church and at the grocery store checkout line. One became a nurse. One became a teacher. One became an office manager who wore nice blazers and talked about benefits. They married men who looked like they belonged on holiday cards. They had babies, or were trying, or at least had a respectable timeline. My mother would tell anyone who listened, "My girls are doing so well," and then she'd look at me like I was the dent in the picture frame. I stayed. I stayed because I was still in school when my dad died, because my mother cried into my shoulder at night and called me her last one, because I didn't want to leave her alone in that house when it still smelled like him. I stayed because it was cheaper, because I thought helping her meant love, because part of me believed that if I did enough, she'd eventually soften and see me. Spoiler, she didn't. My mother's money situation was always complicated. She had income, but debt followed her like a shadow. Credit cards, late fees, overdue property taxes. After my dad died, the ugly envelopes started piling up, and she would slide them toward me like homework. I'd call the numbers, sit on hold, set up payment plans, try to sound calm while my stomach flipped. Because the truth was, I was terrified we'd lose the house. If the power got cut off, my mother would blame the world. If the bank called, she'd blame my sisters for being busy. If the mail came with red letters, she'd blame stress. If anything went wrong, she blamed me for not fixing it fast enough. While all that was happening, I fell in love with makeup. Not the luxury, I have money to burn kind. The kind you find on the bottom shelf of a pharmacy. The kind you buy with coupons. The kind you use to make yourself feel like you can face the world even when everything else is falling apart. I started practicing on my own face in the bathroom late at night, watching tutorials with the volume almost off so my mother wouldn't hear and roll her eyes. I practiced on friends for dances. I did a neighbor's makeup for a job interview. I did a cousin's makeup for her courthouse wedding and got paid in a gift card and a hug. It made me feel useful in a way that was mine. So I started making my own little videos. I'd set my phone on a stack of books, use a cheap ring light I bought secondhand, and talk like I was talking to a friend, because that's how it felt. "Okay," I'd say, brushing powder onto my cheeks. "If you've ever stood in your bathroom with 5 minutes and panic, this is for you." I kept it accessible because most people I knew weren't buying high-end palettes. They were buying groceries and gas and trying to make rent. They wanted to look awake. They wanted to feel pretty. They wanted something they could actually do. At first, it was basically nothing. A few likes, a couple comments from strangers. My aunt would sometimes share the videos to her friends, which was sweet and also made me want to crawl into a hole, because her friends would comment cute, like I was a kid showing them a drawing. My mother treated it like a disease. She'd walk past my bedroom and make coughing sounds. She called it your little doll hobby. She'd say, your sisters save lives and teach children, and you smear paint on your face. And she'd say it in front of people too, like she wanted an audience to witness my humiliation. When my sisters came over with their husbands and kids, my mother would praise them like saints, and then glance at me and add, and then there's our baby, still figuring out what she wants to be. I'd laugh like it was funny. It wasn't funny. I also worked. I didn't sit in my room filming all day. I had a regular job as a receptionist at a small clinic across town, the kind of place with old magazines in the waiting room and coffee that tastes like punishment. I answered phones, checked people in, scanned forms, and got yelled at when insurance was confusing like it was my fault. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. On Saturdays, I took freelance makeup gigs when I could get them, small weddings, baby showers, family photos. I kept my kit clean and my prices low because I was still starting, and because I was terrified people would think I was greedy. Yes, I know, that's a flaw. I'm aware. Every month I gave my mother money for the electric bill. Sometimes I paid it directly because she would forget. I bought groceries when she said we were out. I replaced the broken vacuum. I did the dishes. I did the laundry. I did emotional labor like it was my second job, listening to her talk about how hard her life was, how nobody understood, how my sisters were busy, and how she didn't want to bother them. She'd say, "At least I have you." I used to hear that as love. Eventually, I started hearing it as a leash. Still, part of me kept hoping she'd see the good in me if I just did one more thing, if I built something real. Maybe she'd stop treating me like a mistake. That was the delusion I carried into that morning at the sink, with my phone balanced on the dish rack and my lipstick still fresh, when she stared at me like I'd personally insulted her by trying. She pointed at my face. "Wipe that off. You look ridiculous." Something in me snapped, quietly, the way thread breaks after too much pulling. I wanted to say 100 things. I wanted to remind her I'd been there when she fell apart. I wanted to say I wasn't the one swiping her cards. I wanted to say my sisters got praised for existing while I got punished for dreaming, but I didn't. I just turned the camera off and swallowed my anger like I always did. I didn't realize yet that swallowing it was making it heavier. 2 weeks after that sink morning, one of my videos finally did something other than politely exist. It wasn't fancy. It was me in my tiny bedroom using products you could buy with loose change and a little hope, showing a 5-minute face for people who had to clock in and pretend they were fine. I posted it, went to my receptionist shift, and forgot about it because forgetting was safer than expecting. Then my phone started buzzing like it was possessed. By my lunch break, the views were in the thousands. By the time I got home, it had climbed into the 10,000s. I know that sounds small compared to the internet's idea of success, but to me it felt like someone finally knocked back from the door and said, "Hey, I hear you." I walked into the house with a grocery bag, stupidly proud like I was carrying proof. I'd bought my mother her favorite sweetbread and a little pastry she liked. Not because she deserved it, if I'm being honest, but because I was still chasing that one moment where she looked at me like I mattered. She was at the kitchen table sorting mail. My stomach tightened automatically. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I brought you something." She didn't look up. "What now?" "It's your favorite," I said, setting the bag down. I had a good day. That finally got her eyes on me, sharp and suspicious. "A good day doing what? Playing makeup?" "My video did really well," I said, and my voice cracked a little, which I hated. "It hit 10,000 views." She blinked once, then laughed. Not a warm laugh. The kind of laugh that means, "You're adorable for thinking this matters." "And?" she said. "And it means it's growing," I said. "People are watching. It could turn into something." She leaned back, arms crossed. 10,000 strangers watched you smear paint on your face and you think you won the lottery. "It's not," I started. "No," she cut in. "Listen to me. I did not raise you for this. I did not lose my husband. Struggle, keep a roof over your head so you could embarrass this family online." I stared at her. My hands went cold. "Embarrass the family?" "Yes," she said like it was obvious. "Your sisters have real jobs. They're women. They have husbands, children, responsibilities. and you're in your room making faces at a phone. It's pathetic. Something hot rose up my throat. I have a job, I said, louder than I meant to. I pay the electric bill. I help you with your bills. I'm not sitting around. She shrugged. You're still a disappointment. There it was, clean, simple, like she'd been holding it in her mouth and finally spit it out. I stood there with the grocery bag between us like a sad peace offering and felt something shift. Not just hurt, not just anger, something else. Clarity, cold and calm. Okay, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. She watched me like she was waiting for my meltdown. My mother loved my meltdowns. They proved her point, but I didn't give her one. I picked up the bag, walked past her, went to my room, closed the door, and cried so quietly I could barely hear myself. I know. Dramatic. But it felt like my chest was collapsing. That night she watched television like nothing had happened. She laughed at something on the screen. She made tea. She didn't knock on my door. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't even mention the bread. I lay awake staring at the ceiling doing the horrible mental math people do when they're desperate. How much did I have saved? How many shifts could I pick up? How quickly could I leave without setting off a war? I thought about my sisters. If I called them, they'd tell me to calm down, to understand Mom, to stop being sensitive. They got her in small doses. I lived inside her moods. The only person who ever made my mother hesitate was my grandmother on my father's side. She was in her 70s, lived alone in a modest house across town, and had this quiet, stubborn kindness that made you feel safe without making you feel small. My mother never liked her, which tells you everything you need to know. I stared at my phone for a long time before I called. When my grandmother answered, her voice was sleepy but warm. Honey? My throat tightened. Can I come stay with you for a little while? I asked. Just until I figure things out. In the pause, I expected questions. I expected skepticism. I expected that disappointed tone I'd learned to brace for at home. Instead, she said, Of course. When do you want to come? I swallowed hard. Tomorrow morning. Okay, she said, like it was nothing. I'll make breakfast. The next morning, I packed a backpack and a duffel while my mother slept. I took my makeup kit, my laptop, a couple changes of clothes, and the framed photo of my dad I kept hidden in my closet because my mother hated seeing his face. Like it reminded her he existed before she made grief her whole identity. I paused in the hallway, looking at her closed bedroom door. For a second, I thought about waking her up. The big dramatic conversation, the speech, the demand for respect, but I knew exactly how it would go. She'd cry, she'd yell, she'd call my sisters, she'd paint me as the villain before I got my shoes on. So I left quietly. I walked out into the morning air with the strap biting into my shoulder, got in my old car, and drove away while the sun came up like it had no idea my whole life had just changed. Halfway there, I started shaking so hard I had to pull over. Not because I regretted leaving, because I couldn't believe I finally did it. My grandmother opened the front door before I even knocked, like she'd been watching through the window. She wrapped her arms around me and held on longer than people usually do. The smell of her soap and the warmth of her cardigan hit me so hard I almost dropped my bag. Come in, she said. You look exhausted. I wanted to say, I'm fine, because that's what I always said. Instead, I said, I'm sorry, because apparently my default emotion is guilt. Don't, she said. Not gently, firmly. You don't have to apologize for needing peace. She made eggs and toast and sat across from me at her small kitchen table. The kitchen was old, but clean. Plants by the window, a little radio on the counter. It felt like a different universe from my mother's house, where everything was either tense or heavy or both. I tried to explain without spilling everything. I said my mother and I were not getting along, which was the understatement of the century. I said I wanted to focus on work and my makeup videos, and my mother didn't respect it. My grandmother listened like I was a person worth taking seriously. When I mentioned the videos, she squinted. So you're teaching people? Sort of, I said. I'm showing them how to do makeup with stuff they can actually afford. Like, normal people. She nodded slowly. That sounds useful. It's on my phone, I said, and showed her one. She watched it like it was a documentary, leaning in, paying attention. When it ended, she said, You have a nice voice. You sound like you care about them. I laughed, half embarrassed. I do care. Then keep doing it, she said, like the decision was simple. Your father would have liked that you're building something. That hit me hard. My dad had been the only person who looked at me like I had potential instead of like I was a problem. He bought me my first little makeup palette for my birthday and said, If it makes you happy, it makes sense. After he died, it felt like that kind of support died with him. My grandmother showed me the spare bedroom. It used to be my dad's old room. Worn dresser, closet that smelled like cedar, a small framed photo of him leaning on a toolbox, smiling like he'd just told a joke. I stood there holding my duffel and felt like I'd been punched in the throat, in a good way. In a, I miss him so much I can't breathe way. You can set up your little filming stuff in here, my grandmother said. Make it your space. That first week, I slept more than I had in months. Not perfect sleep, but real sleep. The kind where you don't wake up with your heart racing because you heard a door slam. I still worked my receptionist job, just with a longer commute, and I told my boss I was staying with family for a bit. She raised an eyebrow like she could smell drama. People always can, but she didn't push. 3 days after I left, my mother finally noticed. Not because she missed me, because she assumed I'd crawl back. And when I didn't, she realized the free help was gone. My phone exploded with messages that weren't, "Are you safe?" or "Where are you?" They were, "How dare you?" and "You're selfish." And "You're going to kill me with stress," and "After everything I've done for you." I stared at the screen and felt my stomach drop. Part of me still wanted her to care. Even if she was angry, even if she yelled, I wanted one sign she missed me as a person, not as a service. She didn't. When I didn't answer, she switched tactics. "Fine. Don't come crying when you fail." Then she went silent. My sisters didn't. The oldest called first, always the diplomat, always worried about appearances. "What is going on?" she asked, already sounding annoyed like I'd interrupted her real life. "I moved out," I said. "Let's be mature," she said immediately. "You can't just abandon Mom. She's alone. She's a widow." "I didn't abandon her," I snapped. "I left an abusive situation." There was a pause where I could feel her deciding if that word was too dramatic. "Abusive is a strong word," she said finally. "Of course it is," I muttered, "because it's happening to me." She sighed like I was exhausting. "She's grieving. She's been grieving for years," I said. "And I've been her punching bag for years. I'm done." The middle sister, the one who speaks like a spreadsheet and treats emotions like a defect, texted me a paragraph about family values and respect. The youngest older sister sent a voice message crying about how our mother doesn't eat when she's stressed, which was a lie. My mother ate just fine. She just loved making herself the tragic character. Then the humiliation went public. A friend from my old neighborhood messaged, "Hey, is everything okay? Your mom is posting stuff." I opened the neighborhood forum app, the one for lost pets, porch packages, and passive-aggressive curtain twitching. And there it was. My mother's post about her ungrateful youngest, who had run away to play internet star, while leaving her broken and alone. She mentioned my grandmother like she was a villain stealing me. She hinted I was being influenced by bad people. She ended with praying for my return, like she was the hero in a sermon. People commented because people love a story. Some told her she deserved better. Some asked if I was on drugs. One suggested I was probably just trying to avoid responsibility. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I didn't, because I can't afford new phones. But I wanted to. My grandmother saw my face. "What happened?" I showed her the post, shaking with rage and shame. She read it slowly and handed my phone back. "She's trying to embarrass you into coming home," she said. "She's succeeding," I whispered. "No," my grandmother said. "She's showing people who she is. You just have to survive the noise long enough for them to see it." I wish I could tell you I didn't care. I cared so much it made me nauseous. I hated being painted as the bad daughter. I hated seeing my mother comforted in public for hurting me in private. I hated that my sisters, the responsible ones, let her rewrite history because it was easier than confronting her. There were nights I sat on my grandmother's bed typing a message to my mother and deleting it. I almost went back. More than once. Not because I wanted to, because guilt is a drug, and my mother knew exactly how to sell it. But in the middle of all that, my channel kept growing. I kept filming after work in my dad's old room, with my grandmother occasionally popping her head in to ask if I wanted tea. I kept doing Saturday gigs, driving to modest venues to do brides who were nervous and sweet and just wanted to feel pretty for one day. I kept telling myself, one more week, one more video. 3 months after I moved in with my grandmother, my subscriber count crawled past 50,000. By the 6th month, it slowed and steadied, and weirdly that made me trust it more. I stared at the number and cried, not because it meant I was famous, but because it meant I wasn't crazy. People were listening, people were learning, people were staying, and my mother still hadn't asked if I was okay. About a year after I moved out, when I was 24, something happened that felt like lightning, even though it was really just a door creaking open. My grandmother asked me one night while we were watching television, "Why do all these women on your phone look like babies?" She said it like a real question, not an insult. She wanted to know why nobody talked to women her age without making them feel invisible. So I filmed a tutorial specifically for mature skin. Fine lines, dry patches, the kind of tiredness you can't cover with concealer. My grandmother sat behind the camera sometimes, telling me when I was going too fast. She took her role very seriously. I posted it and went to sleep. When I woke up, my phone was exploding. Comments, messages, shares, people writing things like, "Thank you for not making us feel old," and "I'm crying because I finally feel seen." I read them in bed and felt my eyes burn. That video went viral, real viral. Millions of views over the next few weeks. I'd never even said the word millions about my own life without joking, and suddenly there it was on my screen like it belonged to me. Then the emails started. Small cosmetics companies reaching out. Not the giant glamorous ones. Real little businesses asking if I'd try a product and mention it. I learned fast who was serious and who was just offering exposure. My first real deal was $5,000 and a full kit of products. I stared at the email so long my grandmother thought something was wrong. When the money hit my account, I didn't go shopping. I paid bills. I paid my grandmother's overdue property taxes she'd never told me about. I fixed things she'd been putting off. I booked the doctor visit she kept skipping. And I started saving, because when money has always been a crisis, you don't celebrate. You brace. And that's when my mother reappeared. Not in my life, but in public. I was scrolling through comments one night when I saw someone tag my mother in a reply. Curiosity grabbed me by the throat. I clicked and found her page filled with church quotes and casserole photos and, right there, a post about how proud she was of her baby. She wrote a whole paragraph about how she'd always encouraged my creativity, how she'd sacrificed so much, how she'd never doubted I would shine. I stared at the screen with my mouth open. My grandmother tried to take the phone like I was holding something sharp. "Don't," she said softly. "She's rewriting my life like it's a hobby," I said, and my laugh came out harsh. "She's looking for praise," my grandmother said. "Don't feed it." I wish I listened. Because attention brings opinions, and opinions bring strangers who talk like they've known you forever. People started accusing me of living off my grandmother. "Must be nice," someone wrote, "to use your grandma for free housing while you get rich." Another said, "You're exploiting an old lady." Another said, "If you're making money, why aren't you taking care of your mom? That's your responsibility." It was like my mother's voice had multiplied into the comment section. And instead of logging off like a mature person, I did what I always did when I felt cornered. I snapped. I replied to one comment, then another, then 10, hands shaking, heart racing, arguing with strangers in my pajamas like it was a moral duty. It wasn't noble. It was humiliating. Someone took screenshots. Of course they did. The next day, my older sister texted, "What are you doing? Mom is so upset." I stared at that message like it came from another dimension. "She's upset?" I typed back. She posted she always supported me. "She's trying," my sister wrote. "You're making her look bad." I laughed out loud. Alone, in my grandmother's kitchen. It sounded a little unhinged, honestly. Then my mother used my online outburst as proof I was unstable. She told people I was being influenced. She told my sisters I needed to come home so she could help me, like she was offering rehab. Seeing my anger turned into her evidence did something to me. It made me realize that if I kept engaging, I would drown. My mother didn't even need to touch me anymore. She could just point at my reactions and say, "See? This is what I deal with." So I went quiet. Not silent in my life. Silent online. I stopped responding. I stopped reading every comment. I focused on work, on filming, on taking my grandmother to appointments, on cooking dinners that didn't come from a box. Slowly, my channel stabilized. It didn't just spike and crash. It became something real. Over the next months, my subscriber count climbed, and my monthly income became steady enough that I could breathe. And still, the family noise didn't stop. It just moved closer. 2 years into doing this seriously, somewhere between my second summer and my third fall in my grandmother's spare room, my life looked almost normal from the outside. I still worked at the clinic because I didn't trust the internet enough to quit my steady paycheck. I still drove my old car that made a sad noise when it turned on. I still slept in my dad's old room with his photo on the dresser. But after work, I filmed with better lighting. I had a decent camera. I had shelves instead of a chaotic makeup bag. And I had money in my account that didn't instantly disappear into emergencies. That's when my sisters remembered I existed as more than a cautionary tale. At first, it was small. The oldest sister called my grandmother in that syrupy tone people use when they want something. "Just checking on you," she said, like she'd been doing it all along. Later, my grandmother told me, stirring soup like she was casually reporting the weather. She asked if you were still doing your videos. I snorted. Still. Like it's a phase. She asked if you have a manager, my grandmother added. I do, I said. It's me. I'm the manager. Also the editor, the accountant, and the person who cries in the bathroom sometimes. My grandmother smiled. She wants to talk to you. Of course she did. They started coming by more often. Not all together at first because that would have been too obvious. One stopped by with cookies. One dropped off a gift for my grandmother. One invited me to lunch, just to catch up. It felt like watching animals circle a campfire. When we finally sat down together in my grandmother's living room, it wasn't warm. It was tense. Their eyes kept flicking toward my filming setup like it was a winning scratch ticket. The oldest sister started with the peace angle. We've all been through a lot, she said. We should be closer. Dad would want that. I hated when people used my father like a prop, especially people who hadn't been there when I was the one holding my mother while she sobbed into my shoulder. I'm not against being closer, I said carefully. I'm against being bullied. The middle sister made a face. Mom doesn't bully you, she said. She's just blunt. She calls me a disappointment, I said. That's not blunt, that's cruelty. They didn't ask how I was, not really. They asked about numbers and income and whether I'd invested. They framed it like concern, but it was curiosity with teeth. They weren't broke. They were overextended. Daycare, car payments, their own debt. And helping meant volunteering my money. Then the oldest sister said, Mom is struggling. My stomach clenched. She's always struggling, I said. She's struggling more, she corrected. She might lose the house. I stared at her. How? They glanced at each other like they'd rehearsed this. The middle sister pulled an envelope from her bag and slid it across the coffee table like she was serving me a subpoena. It was full of official-looking papers and numbers that made my skin prickle. Mortgage, the oldest sister said. Taxes. Credit cards. I flipped through the pages, heart pounding. Late notices. Threats. Amounts that made my brain go fuzzy. And you're telling me this now, I said slowly. Because the oldest sister leaned forward, eyes earnest. Because you can help. There it was. The real sentence. The reason they were sitting in my grandmother's living room pretending to care. You want me to pay for Mom's house, I said. We want you to contribute, the middle sister corrected, like wording made it less ugly. We're family, the oldest sister said. It's what family does. Something cold settled in my chest. Where was family when she humiliated me? I asked. Where was family when she posted about me online like I was a criminal? Where was family when she went weeks without asking if I was alive? They shifted. The youngest older sister, the one who always looked like she was holding her breath, finally spoke. Mom was in a bad place, she said quietly. She's always in a bad place, I snapped, and I'm always the one expected to pull her out. The middle sister rolled her eyes. You're being dramatic, she said. You're making it personal. It is personal, I said. It's my life. Then the youngest older sister took a breath and said, Mom thinks you owe her. She thinks you're making money because she pushed you. I laughed, sharp and ugly. She pushed me? I repeated. She pushed me out of the house. The oldest sister reached into her bag again and pulled out another paper. My father's old insurance company name right at the top. Just seeing it made my stomach flip. This is what it comes down to, she said. Mom used the insurance money to keep the house. It's the least you can do, after everything. My hands started shaking. Not because I didn't understand their logic. Because I did. My mother had taken my father's death and turned it into a currency she spent and spent and spent, and now she wanted to cash in again. I paid the electric bill, I said, voice cracking. For years. I called banks. I set up plans. I begged her to stop opening new cards. She didn't listen. And now you want me to pour my money into her hole so she can keep doing it? The middle sister's mouth tightened. So you're just going to let her lose the house? I looked at my grandmother. She'd been quiet the whole time, watching us with a tired expression. Her hand was resting against her chest like she was holding herself together. Grandma, I whispered, are you okay? I'm fine, she said. But she didn't sound fine. Then she pressed her hand harder and winced. Her face went pale. My whole body went cold. Grandma? My sisters froze, finally dropping their performance. The oldest stood up, panicked. Do we call someone? I'm calling, I said, already grabbing my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. Just move. Give her space. It ended up being a blood pressure spike, not a heart attack, but it scared me more than I can explain. Sitting in urgent care with my grandmother, watching her breathe slowly while a nurse took her vitals, I felt rage rise like fire. Not just at my mother, at my sisters, at myself, at the whole sick system that turned my grandmother's living room into a battlefield over money. When we got home, my sisters tried to act concerned again, asked if she needed anything, offered to stay. It was too late. I could see through them now. I walked them to the door and said, "Don't come back here for this." The oldest sister looked offended. "For what?" "For money," I said. "For guilt. For your mother's mess. She's your mother too," the middle sister snapped. "I know," I said quietly. "And that's the problem." After they left, I sat on my grandmother's kitchen floor and cried. Not because I was weak, but because I was tired of being the family's emergency exit. The next morning, my mother messaged me for the first time in months. "I hear you have money now. We need to talk." No hello, no apology, just a demand. And I felt, in my bones, that if I didn't draw a line now, she would swallow me whole. That urgent care scare flipped a switch. Before, I was trying to survive. After, I wanted to protect. My grandmother never asked me to protect her. She hated being a burden. But watching her sit in her recliner that week, quiet and shaken, pretending she wasn't, I thought, no one is turning this woman's home into a guilt trap again. Not while I'm here. So I did something I'd never done before. I got emotionally uncooperative. I blocked the middle sister and the youngest older sister. I kept the oldest unblocked because she acted like the family messenger, and I wanted to see what she tried next. My mother stayed blocked, not because it felt good, because it felt necessary. Then I took my money and put it where my love actually lived. My grandmother's house needed work. The roof leaked when it rained hard. The bathroom tub was slippery enough to make my stomach knot every time she stepped in. The kitchen cabinets were stiff and low, and her hands hurt when she tried to open them. She'd been living with all of it for years because she didn't want to spend money on herself. I hired a local contractor, regular guy, dusty boots, pencil behind his ear, who called me ma'am like I was older than I was. I sat at my grandmother's table with printed estimates and asked questions like I understood construction. I probably sounded ridiculous, but I learned fast. We got a new roof. We fixed the bathroom with safety rails and a shower she could step into without risking her life. We improved the lighting in the hallway so she wouldn't trip over shadows. We adjusted the kitchen so she could reach things without straining. My grandmother kept saying, "This is too much." I kept saying, "It's not enough." Around the same time, my channel kept growing. I hit just under 500,000 subscribers in the same month the contractor finished the kitchen. I remember because I was standing in the doorway looking at the fresh paint when my phone buzzed. I stared at the notification, then laughed, then cried, then laughed again like I was losing my mind. I also bought a different car, not new, used, reliable. One that didn't cough when it started. I needed it for work, for hauling equipment to weddings, for driving my grandmother to appointments without praying my engine wouldn't die at a stoplight. When the renovation started, my sisters showed up like moths to a porch light. They came to check on Grandma. They came to see the house. They came with tight smiles and wide eyes, taking in the new roof and the updated kitchen like it was a personal insult. The oldest sister ran her hand along the cabinet handle. "Wow," she said, and her voice wasn't admiration. It was calculation. My grandmother beamed anyway. "Isn't it nice? She did this. She worked so hard." The middle sister's eyes flicked to me. "Must be nice," she muttered. "It is nice," I said. "For her." They didn't stay long. They didn't ask how my grandmother felt. They didn't ask if she was sleeping better now that the house wasn't leaking. They just absorbed proof of my stability and left. Like they were going to carry it back to my mother as gossip fuel. Sure enough, a few days later, the oldest sister texted, "Mom knows you're renovating Grandma's house. She's devastated." Devastated. Like making my grandmother's bathroom safer was some kind of betrayal. I didn't respond. Then my mother tried a new tactic, sending messages through other people. A cousin. "Your mom says she just wants to talk." An aunt. "She misses you." Someone from church sent me a paragraph about honoring your parents. I stared at my phone and felt my old guilt itch under my skin like a bruise being poked. I wasn't perfectly strong. There were nights I lay in bed staring at the ceiling thinking, maybe I'm cruel, maybe I'm cold, maybe I'm turning into her. Then I'd see my grandmother in the morning making coffee, humming softly, not bracing for anyone's anger, and I'd remember why the line existed. I made another mistake around that time. I filmed a video about setting boundaries with family. I didn't name anyone. I thought I was being vague and mature. But people aren't stupid. A few followers had seen my mother's public posts and connected the dots. The comments turned into a mess, people arguing about what you owe your parents. I read it for 5 minutes and felt my chest tighten like a fist. So I did the healthiest thing I know how to do when anxiety spikes. I deleted the app from my phone for a week. I focused on my real life, work, dinner, helping my grandmother plant flowers, watching her sit on the porch with iced tea, looking like she had room to breathe. And quietly, without the constant noise of my mother, something in me healed. Not fully, but enough to realize this was what I'd been chasing my whole life, peace that didn't require permission. That's why, when my mother finally showed up in person, I didn't fall apart the way I used to. It happened on a random Tuesday, which feels fitting because most life-altering moments don't come with dramatic music. They come with a doorbell. I was home early because the clinic had been slow. My grandmother was folding laundry in the living room, the television low. I was in the kitchen cleaning makeup brushes, half listening to my grandmother complain about the neighbor's dog. Normal life, safe life. Then the doorbell rang. My grandmother looked up, puzzled. "Are you expecting someone?" "No," I said, and my gut tightened. I dried my hands and walked to the door. When I opened it, my mother was standing on the porch holding a casserole dish like a peace offering. Her hair was done. Her lipstick was perfect. She looked like she had dressed for an audience. "Hi, baby," she said. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't called me a disappointment. Like she hadn't posted about me online. Like she hadn't punished me with silence. For a second, my body tried to react on autopilot. The old version of me wanted to step aside and let her in because conflict was exhausting. But the urgent care waiting room flashed in my mind like a warning sign. I didn't move. "Why are you here?" I asked. Her smile wavered. "I brought food," she said, lifting the dish. "I thought we could talk like adults." "Adults," I repeated. "Like when you called me a clown at the sink? Or when you told the neighborhood I ran away to play internet star?" Her eyes narrowed. The mask slipped, then smoothed back on. "You're being dramatic," she said. "I never said you were a clown." "You did," I said. She shrugged. "If I did, it was because I was stressed. You don't understand what it's like to be a widow." "I do understand," I said, and my voice shook. "I watched you fall apart. I held you up. I stayed. I paid bills. I was there." She made a small scoffing sound. "You always want credit." I felt my face burn. "Credit? You're the one posting online that you always supported me." Her eyes flicked away, then back. "People were talking," she said quickly. "I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself," I said. She stepped forward like she was going to push past me. I stepped sideways and blocked the doorway without thinking. My heart pounded, but my feet stayed planted. My mother looked past me and spotted my grandmother. Her expression shifted. Softer. Sweeter. "Hi," she called, voice suddenly syrupy. "I brought something for you." My grandmother stood slowly, her posture straightening like she was bracing for weather. "Hello," she said, not smiling. My mother snapped her attention back to me. "Can I come in?" "No," I said. Her mouth opened, shocked like no one had ever told her no. Then her face hardened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "You can talk on the porch or you can leave." My grandmother walked closer, stopping behind me. I could feel her like a steady hand at my back. My mother's voice dropped, sharp. "I'm your mother," she hissed. "You don't get to talk to me like this." "You talked to me however you wanted for years," I said. "Now I'm done pretending it didn't happen." Her eyes went glossy in an instant. My mother could cry on command like it was a talent. "I just wanted to see you," she said, voice trembling. "I've been worried sick." "Worried," I repeated. "You went weeks without asking if I was okay. The only reason you're here is because you heard I'm making money." "That's not true," she snapped, then softened again. "I always knew you were special. I was tough on you because I wanted you to be strong. I wanted you to prove yourself." I stared at her. "You don't get to call cruelty a strategy now." She gripped the casserole dish tighter. "I didn't want you to end up broke and alone like me," she said. And there it was, the truth slipping out. "I wanted you to have stability." For half a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the sink, her laughter, the way she enjoyed breaking me down. If you wanted me to have stability, I said, you wouldn't have tried to drag me back the moment you thought I might fail. She opened her mouth to deny it, so I pulled out my phone and scrolled. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I found the messages from the week I left, the ones where she called me selfish and told me not to come crying. I held the screen out. Read it, I said. She didn't look. Her jaw tightened. Why are you doing this? She demanded. Why are you humiliating me? I'm not humiliating you, I said. I'm refusing to let you rewrite what you did. Her eyes flicked toward the street, suddenly aware of neighbors, of witnesses. She lowered her voice. We should talk inside, she said again. No, I repeated. Her face changed. The sweetness dropped all the way. Fine, she said. If you want to be like that, then be like that. But you need to help me. There it was. No mask. I'm behind, she said, sharp. The house is at risk. Your sisters can't cover it. You can. You haven't apologized, I said. Her eyes widened like I'd asked for something insane. You want an apology? For what? For trying to raise you? For pushing you? For not letting you be lazy? I stared at her, and something in me clicked into place like a lock turning. You're not here because you love me, I said quietly. You're here because you want access. I gave birth to you, she snapped. And my grandmother saved me, I said. I stepped slightly so she could see her standing behind me, calm and tired. She's the one who fed me when I was falling apart. She's the one who told me I wasn't crazy. She's the one who took me in when you were busy posting about me. My mother's eyes flicked to my grandmother, and for a second I saw jealousy, raw and ugly. You're turning her against me, my mother accused. No, my grandmother said, voice steady. You did that yourself. My mother whipped her head toward her. Stay out of this. You're on my porch, my grandmother said. I'm in it. That's when my mother's control finally slipped. She started talking faster and louder, like volume could force reality back into her favor. She called me selfish, ungrateful, a traitor. She said my father would be ashamed. She said the internet brainwashed me. I listened, not because I believed her, but because I wanted to hear it clearly, to never forget it. When she finally paused to breathe, I said, You need to leave. She blinked. What? You need to leave, I repeated. You're not coming inside. You're not getting money. You're not doing this here. Her tears came again, but this time they looked like rage. You'll regret this, she hissed. When something happens to me, you'll regret it. That old reflex tried to rise, collapse under guilt, beg, fix, save. But I looked at my grandmother and remembered urgent care. Her pale face, my own panic. If something happens to you, I said, voice shaking, it will be because you refuse to take care of yourself like an adult. Not because I didn't rescue you. The sentence hung there like smoke. My grandmother's hand rested on my shoulder, grounding me. My mother stared at me for a long second, then turned and walked down the steps, casserole dish still in her hands. Halfway to her car, she looked back. This isn't over, she said. I didn't answer. I closed the door and my legs started shaking so hard I had to sit on the floor. My grandmother sat beside me. You did the right thing, she said softly. I nodded, but my chest hurt. Because even when you escape a toxic home, your body still expects the fire alarm to go off. A few weeks after my mother's porch performance, I started thinking about the future in a way that felt almost insulting, like I was pretending I deserved it. The renovations made my grandmother's house safer, but it was still old with stairs and little risks that only look fine until the day they aren't. One evening we were sorting mail when my grandmother mentioned her friend moved into a one-story place closer to town. No stairs, she said, like it was a luxury. Would you ever want something like that? I asked. She frowned immediately. Why would I leave this house? Your father grew up here. I know, I said, but you deserve easier. She squeezed my hand. I don't want you spending your whole life taking care of me. I'm not. I lied. I started looking anyway. Nothing flashy, just a one-story home with wide hallways and a bathroom that didn't make my stomach knot. I went to viewings on lunch breaks, heart racing, telling myself I was just gathering information. When I found the right place, my grandmother walked through it quietly and stopped by the window. It's peaceful, she whispered. That was enough. The day we met with the real estate agent to sign the paperwork, my stomach was in knots. Big life steps still felt dangerous, like something bad would happen the second I relaxed. 2 days earlier, the oldest sister called my grandmother with that syrupy, checking-in voice. My grandmother, trying to be polite, mentioned the appointment without thinking. She told me later she heard my mother's voice in the background like the call was on speaker. My gut sank. I didn't cancel. I was tired of planning my life around her. Then the office door opened and my mother walked in like she owned the air. She smiled at the agent, then looked at me with forced sweetness. "There you are," she said. The agent blinked. The receptionist looked up. A couple in the waiting chairs pretended not to listen. "Ma'am," the agent said, calm and professional, "this is a private appointment. If you're not on the paperwork, I'll have to ask you to wait outside." "That's my daughter," my mother said, nodding at me like I was a display item. I just wanted to be here for this big family moment. I felt heat crawl up my neck, but my voice stayed steady. "This isn't a family moment," I said. "It's a private appointment." My mother's smile twitched. "Don't be like that," she whispered. "I'm trying to support you." "You didn't support me," I said quietly. "You mocked me until you thought I'd fail. You only showed up when you heard I was making money." Her eyes flicked down to the paperwork and sharpened as she realized what we were doing. "So you can buy a house," she said. "But you can't help me keep mine." I took a slow breath. "No," I said. "I can't." She leaned in, voice low and furious. "You're really going to abandon me?" I looked at her and felt the old wound ache for a second. Then I remembered the sink. The word clown. The way she loved watching me shrink. I said clearly, "You told me you didn't raise me for this. You told me I was a disappointment. So here's the part you don't get to rewrite. I built this without you." Her face went pale, then red. She tried to speak, but I kept going. "You don't get the house," I said. "You don't get my car. You don't get to stand here and pretend you were part of it. You are going to have to do what you always told me to do. Get a plan, cut your spending, and live with your choices." My grandmother's hand found mine under the table. The agent cleared their throat gently. "Ma'am," they said to my mother, still polite, "this appointment is private. If you're not listed, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." My mother forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry," she said. "Family stuff." Then she walked out. After she left, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not because I doubted what I said, because I was watching my body unlearn obedience in real time. We signed. I didn't buy the house outright. I used a down payment, kept my clinic job, and we got a small mortgage so I wouldn't gamble our stability on the internet. We moved a month later. My grandmother planted flowers in the yard like she was finally claiming a life she'd postponed. I set up a filming corner in the spare room and kept my clinic job because I like knowing the lights will stay on, even if the internet decides to be moody. The part my mother didn't put online was what happened next. By late spring, I heard through a cousin that a final notice showed up at her door and my sisters were scrambling. Turns out my mother hadn't just been behind. She'd been hiding it, shuffling bills between drawers and opening new cards like it was a magic trick. The house still ended up going on the market. My mother ended up in a small rental, then in my oldest sister's spare room, insisting I'd abandoned her. The lecture calls got quieter after that. Not because they suddenly understood me, but because my mother's mess started demanding their money too. As for the neighborhood forum and church chatter, it didn't explode into some dramatic public reckoning. It did something more realistic. It got boring. She posted another ungrateful daughter rant, and someone replied, "Again?" Another person commented, "Ma'am, maybe talk to your family privately." The forum moderator eventually locked one of her posts with a note about personal disputes. At church, a woman who always loved gossip tried to corner my grandmother after service, and our pastor's wife gently stepped between them and said, "Let's not do this here." It wasn't a grand justice moment. It was people quietly realizing the pattern and deciding they didn't want to carry it anymore. One older woman from church pulled my grandmother aside in the grocery aisle and said, "I'm glad you two made peace." I remember thinking, we didn't. She just found a new script. Then the woman lowered her voice and admitted she was sorry for believing the posts. I didn't feel victorious, just relieved. My sisters tried one last family dinner at our new place. The middle sister slid into the conversation with a small loan request and a speech about how I owed Mom. I said no. When she called me selfish, I told her she could be angry from a distance, and I blocked her again. The oldest stopped pushing once my mother started demanding her paycheck too. The youngest emailed me from her work account admitting she hadn't realized how bad it was. I'd blocked her number months before, but email still found me. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to honesty I'd ever gotten out of her. I didn't do dramatic revenge. I didn't ruin anyone. I didn't want my mother on the street. I just refused to be the automatic cash machine that kept the abuse running. I stopped making myself available for it, and that apparently was the most offensive thing I could do. Most mornings now look exactly like the kind of life I used to think I wasn't allowed to have. I wake up, I make coffee. I hear my grandmother humming softly at the kitchen counter. I leave for the clinic with a lunch I packed myself. I come home, film in the spare room, and the house stays quiet in the good way. No tight walls, no bracing, no waiting for a door to slam. And no one calls me a clown for trying.